Hello and welcome to this webinar delivered by the ISM Trust. The ISM Trust is the Incorporated Society of Musicians' sister charity, works to ensure that all music professionals in the UK can reach their full potential. We create pioneering resources to support all those who work in music and seek to challenge, educate and inspire through webinars, seminars, events, printed and digital resources and advice packs. I am Maria Visitiu and I am Member Engagement and Events Officer at the ISM. It is my pleasure to be joined by Ivor Flint for today's webinar on preparing for recorded examinations. Before we begin, a few points. If you experience any technical difficulties such as sound quality issues, please let us know in the chat box and we'll attempt to resolve the issue. If you wish to use them, subtitles are available by adjusting the setting on your webinar at the bottom of your screen. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to view on the ISM's Trust website at ismtrust.org/webinars, as well as on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, please let us know in the questions box and we will endeavour to answer as many of them as possible at the end. Now, without further ado, I will hand over to Ivor for the presentation. I hope you enjoy.
So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ivor Flint. I'm a senior examiner for the London College of Music. I also teach, and with my colleague and Bull here, we've delivered and examined hundreds and thousands of recorded exams now. But I just want to talk a little bit about the just generally recorded exams and that's applicable to hopefully whichever board that you choose to use. So, if I can just share my screen. So I think one of the advantages of recorded exams is that they're flexible. So you're not actually necessarily tied to a time to do an exam. You don't have to wait for those exam slots that happen 3 times a year. So you can easily meet the demands of each of your individual students. So when you've got a student, and I think particularly at some of the earlier grades, where you've got a student who's actually ready and they're really keen to do their exams, rather than hang about and wait, you have the opportunity to use a recorded exam. So I think there are great educational advantages from the digital offer. Some boards offer exams at any time. Some boards, again, they actually have specific slots. So it's always important to check the requirements of the board you're going to use, because there are differences. And I'm not going to cover all the differences. I'm just going to give a sort of generic talk about recorded exams. Always make sure you check the syllabus, because you'll find some boards have they have the standard syllabus, and there might be some amendments that apply specifically to recorded exams that you might need to take into account for. And again, you just check the exam components. Obviously, in a recorded exam, for most boards, you can't do things like sight reading or necessarily the oral test, but it does depend. Do check. And the other thing is always check the recording and uploading instructions. So a couple of technical things that are worth thinking about. Generally, a good frame rate for recording is about 720. Lower than that, and it gets a little tiny bit grainy. Higher than that, once you get a wonderful image, depending on what system you're using, what device you're using, that might actually come at the expense of the bandwidth for the sound, or not, depending on the equipment and the program that you're using. But at 720 is fine. And again, anything bigger than that, apart from potential interference with the sound, you'll get a wonderful crisp picture, but of course it will make the file size so much bigger, and you may have a problem manipulating that and uploading it. So we recommend about 720, and I think actually looking at the other boards, what they were doing, it's about the same. So check the file upload size first. The other thing that's worth checking for is if the recording can be either separate components, in other words, your list A piece, your list B piece, your list C piece, and technical, as separate recordings, or alternatively, if it has to be one continuous uninterrupted recording. Yeah, because there are variations between the boards, and we could debate the pros and cons of those two ideas. But choose your board, choose the board that works best for you. Again, the video formats, I think probably everybody will use WAV, MP4, WMV, or MPG. Those are pretty standard, and I think everyone now has actually got the ability that whatever you load up will be translated into a format that the examiners can view. Most smartphones these days, doesn't matter if it's an iPhone or an Android, the recording is really quite good. So they're good devices to use. And I'll talk a little tiny bit about that in a minute. So before you start your recording, always check to see that you're using, if there are any specific regulations, regarding accompanists or accompaniment, because different boards may stipulate that the accompanist has to be seen. Some say don't say anything at all. Some have strict regulations about recordings accompanying backing tracks, some don't. So again, they are different. So you might make sure you check the detail, because what you don't want to do is submit your recording and then unfortunately somebody comes back to you and says, well, this wasn't compliant, because you won't know until it's too late. The other thing is to think about, when you're preparing your recording, is to actually just choose a room that's not too echoey, because you don't want the whole sound to become a big wash. But the way to do that really is also to test your sound recordings first, as well as the visual video recording. And the thing to look for is the dynamic range. So the loudest part of the loudest playing and the softest playing, and also changing suddenly from loud to soft and soft to loud. And just see see how that works with your device. And also the pitch range. So playing high, playing low, playing high and low together, and again so you can experiment with these and just get an idea of what works best with the device that you're going to be recording on. And again check with and without an accompaniment. So if you've got a passage, for example, say a violin passage, so you've got an accompaniment bit and the violin's playing, and then the accompaniment stops and the violin or the singer or the flautist has a little tiny bit unaccompanied, and then the accompaniment, just check that there isn't anything odd that's happening there in your recording. And it might be that you just need to adjust the microphone or the position of where the device is when you're recording. And the other thing is, do check the lighting to make sure that everything can be seen nice and clearly. Oh, just a minute, it stopped going. There we go. So what's really important from an examiner's perspective is that we want to be able to see the candidate clearly, and their hands. So if they're playing a guitar, we need to be able to see, sorry, I'm demonstrating, but you can't see, but you need to be able to see the fingerboard as well as the candidate, and both right hand and left hand, what's going on. And again, with the piano, again, a sensitive angle so that we can see the candidate and their fingers and what's going on. But again, some exam boards just have a slightly different descriptors for how they want things set up. And again, make sure that the audio quality is good. It's better to have better audio quality and slightly, maybe not quite so good video than the other way around. And again, 720 is the resolution, which tends to work. Always make a test recording. So play about with all these parameters, get to know your equipment before you commit yourself to a recording. And I think it's always worth rehearsing with your candidates, with your students, using the camera and the audio, just to see how it comes out, and incorporate it into some of your lessons. Incorporate recording and playing around with this, because I think you can use those as a really powerful tool for teaching. But also it gets your students used to actually working with the recording, rather than suddenly saying, oh, next Tuesday in the lesson we're going to record your exam. So yeah, I just think the more preparation, the more acclimatization candidates and students can have, probably the better the outcome will be. And the other thing is, it gives you the opportunity to review those recordings together, so you can have a look at your experiments with your students, and you can decide what works and see what's best. I think the other thing about recordings is they are very, very useful tools for teaching. You don't have to use them for every single lesson, but I think if you use them mindfully, if you use them thoughtfully, then you can get a lot of information, and you can actually probably increase someone's progress quite considerably. But I think the thing is, it's how you use recordings. So, and I think they need to be used in a constructive way, in a creative way, what I call active positive listening. And I can't remember if I've got the next slide, if I talked about what that was. Yeah, so this is it. So in your lessons, maybe do a few recordings, and the questions to ask, I think everyone gets fixated about what went wrong. Where are the mistakes? Actually, most of your students will probably know they've made a mistake. Some won't, but most will. I think a better way of reframing this in a more productive way is to actually look and say, what was good? What was good about that performance? What was good about that section? What worked? You can say what didn't work as well, but I think starting with the positive points, actually really, it can be very empowering and a really good learning tool, because then you can see clearly what, from looking at the videos and listening, actually the areas that you can improve. But as long as I think you start from not, this is going to be, we're going to look for all the bits that are bad, and then try and correct those. when I work with recordings with my own students, what I tend to tell them is we want to become curators of the good rather than the collectors of the old rubbish. You know, the old rubbish we know, we just dump that. But, you know, the more good bits you start to collect, I think that collection, you know, you can curate a better performance overall by doing that. So thinking about what was good, what worked, and what can you improve? And is there anything missing? What, you know, is there something I should have done or you could have done that, or maybe something you need to leave out? And also then that's also a good opportunity to just review the recording from a technical perspective to see if you need to make any adjustments either to the video or to the audio. And then the final recording, when you come to that bit, so what this is after you've done, you've had all your experiments, you play with it, your students are acclimatized, they're used to using recordings and they're very happy with it. So check the sound, check the lighting and the framing, make sure everything can be seen and everything can be heard. Some boards ask you to announce pieces, so check in the requirements and in the general syllabus whether an announcement for each piece or an announcement at some point is necessary, and make a check of the recording before you start. So with some boards you can do that. Some boards you have to just you click, you start, and they control the recording. But if you can check that everything's working, just a little test recording before you start, and then you're up and ready to actually start. So if you're ready, then you're ready to record. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I think that's important for candidates and students generally is to view recorded exams or recordings as a performance. Yeah. And I think the key thing is, for what I try and encourage my students to think about is what is it they want to communicate through the performance today. They haven't got an audience, so it might just be me at the other end of a camera, but ultimately there's going to be other people viewing this. So what is it they want to communicate through each of their pieces? You know, what's the story behind those? And imagine that they're doing a live performance rather than just, you know, it's a recording. The more you can move your students away from that, the freer they are to actually perform, enjoy the process, and actually have a better outcome overall. And I think aiming to enjoy that recorded performance as you would for a live performance is vital. Yeah. And the other thing that I think, you know, we all want to be perfect, but, you know, perfection is an ever-moving goal. It will never be perfect, and if it was, would we want to carry on doing it if we were banging out on perfection every time? There's always something. So, and I think you just have to know, that's it. I'm putting that recording to bed now. Let's leave it and let's move on. So after the recording, the boards that don't record directly onto their server, check the quality of the recording. Just make sure the recording is complete, nothing's gone peculiar in the middle or at the end, or at the start even, and just make sure you follow the guidance that each board gives in terms of labeling videos. Yeah, check the file size, check it works. Some boards you can compress. I think most you can now, and if you can, then they usually tell you what software you can download for free to actually compress it, and some will actually compress on as you upload. The other thing that is important is that whatever recording you're doing, do please remember that you can't edit those recordings. Yeah, so no drop-ins, no edits. It has to be a consistent recording of the piece or a recording of the whole exam. Yeah, and also some of us have algorithms that will actually spot if someone's edited it, so just be mindful of that. So the other thing about recorded exams that I'd like to say, I mean, it does increase accessibility. So it means that it doesn't matter where a candidate is, as long as they've got something to record on, they can actually partake in the exams. So it doesn't matter if they're in isolation because of COVID, there's always that recorded option that they can have. And again, I think incorporating recordings into your teaching is a very productive and creative way. It's not, you don't do it necessarily every lesson, but, you know, sometimes I think there's value to be gained there, and because it gives you this opportunity to reflect and actually think about, really give, you know, you can actually analyze what you've done in a positive way, hopefully in constructive way, and I think you can work at the pace of the student, and you'll probably see if with some students that actually recording it, looking at it, viewing it, they actually can start to progress a lot further because they actually know and can see really clearly what you, the teacher, have been saying for the last 3 weeks that they still think they're doing, but they're not. And there's the evidence in front of them, and it's undeniable. And I think that's quite useful. So And I think the other thing is that all of the exams for all of the boards now are regulated and accredited. And so for those students who need to acquire those very valuable UCAS points, you know, that they're on the framework now. And that's it, really. It was a bit short, but I don't think that's it. So I think any questions anyone has, I'd be very happy myself and Annie to answer. Maria.
Thank you. Yes, we haven't had any questions yet, so please send any questions to Ivor or Annie. Annie, is there anything you'd?
Well, I was just going to say that I think having examined loads of these and you know, used it a little bit in my teaching, but I think it's rather nice for the examiner to be spoon-fed and looked after. So it's to have sometimes it's not necessary, but sometimes it's very nice to have a little program, depending if the recording selection is quite complicated, and it's just a little PDF, and that can be very useful, I think, on the profile.
Yeah, but again, that's also dependent on whether you can actually upload data, that kind of data. Along. I mean, certainly with us you can, but I don't know about the other boards.
No, but if it's possible, I just think it's quite a nice thing to do, because it just makes everything very straightforward.
And I think another nice thing that I've seen is sometimes candidates have put a card at the front, you know, like a frame at the front saying what their program's going to be, which is quite useful actually, because it means you haven't got to think, oh, what's coming next. But it depends on how some boards, you type in what you're going to do and then the examiner will see that, so they know.
Super, great. We seem to be receiving some questions. So the first one, is it okay to use an electric piano for the exam?
Again, check your board. Certainly with London College of Music exams, yeah, we will accept a digital piano. Yeah, that's fine. But again, when you're doing the recording, just check the just check what it's picking up. I think the most difficult exams, certainly when next week we talk about live online exams, but I'll talk about a little bit about some of the electric guitar exams, which when they use a distortion pedal, the equipment generally tends to get a bit confused. But I'll talk about that next week, so if you want to find out about that. But you can have fun with those ones if you're a guitar teacher, finding out what works. I've got a thing here. Any tips on the logistics of propping a smartphone up for making the recording? Again, I think you just have to practice. You can actually buy little stands for smartphones. Beanie bags are sometimes quite useful because they're not going to resonate or vibrate, or can't pick up much vibration, but they can be quite helpful. Are iPads better than iPhones for this? I've not noticed any difference between an iPad and an iPhone for recorded exams. I mean, you know, I think iPhones, the quality of recording and the quality of video is really good, and the same with the iPads. But maybe if you've got a very, 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 very early iPad or a very, very early iPhone, it might not be quite as good as some of the later issues. But we've not come across any really particularly disastrous ones, have we, Annie?
No, and I think for the online it's slightly different because But for the recorded, I think, I mean, somebody's just commented about the iPad Pro. Well,
yeah,
yes,
they are.
They are. They're brilliant.
Yes.
Yes. But certainly people who, you don't have to invest thousands in this. I think that's quite important to say that.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. I mean, and certainly I wouldn't, you know, it's not a format of examining that I think at the moment currently that I would suggest you need to go out and buy lots of equipment for. You know, most devices now actually produce a really good quality sound and that's sufficient for examining, and the video is sufficient. However, that's not to say if you want to go out and buy a studio mic and a studio camera, you know, that's fine. And you know, we have people who do that, and also that's part because they're teaching online, so they've invested in the equipment. But it certainly wouldn't, you know, if the picture's a bit grainy or the track's not quite, you know, there's a bit of interference on the track, we wouldn't necessarily. I don't think any board would be really penalised, because you're listening to the candidates, you're listening to the performance. That's what's important.
Sure, thank you. Next question is, how simple is it to set a recording frame at 720p?
You need to go into the settings on your video, and you'll see the ranges that are available. I think you'll find probably most cameras actually automatically do 720 actually.
Okay, super. Any advice on teaching students who use the idea of recorded exams to keep moving the deadline? Can be difficult to pin down exam date. I know the flexibility is a benefit, but then it can be difficult to motivate practice as
Oh
if
gosh,
there was a fixed date.
I think that's an intransigent problem, really. I think that's where we as teachers actually have to do a lot of sort of negotiation and find the appropriate way of making that happen in a timely fashion. But yes, that will. But if you think about it, you get the same thing with you know, with a ordinary face-to-face exam. You know, the candidates are, the students are sort of, oh, I'm not ready yet, not ready, and they are, but you know, or else they're just using it as an excuse and maybe not practice so much. But you know,
Which allows them to move on even, you know, you can do an exam. I mean, I've examined over the period of lockdown, you know, you'll do one candidate and then you'll see the same name crop up 6 months later. And you can see this sort of, it's quite a good way of sort of progress without actually having to go out of your front door.
No. I mean, I have to say we have had occasions where, I mean, obviously because of, you know, COVID, there was a bit of a backlog, but it has been quite interesting. Sometimes we've had you know, somebody do their grade 3 and then you've got their grade 4 exam, or a step 1 and a step 2, or a prep step 1 and step 2 and grade 1. In one case, actually, I remember, I think they'd done the whole lot because that's what they'd done during COVID. They just focused on their piano playing. So for some students, it's been a real, you know, having that has been actually quite therapeutic and helped their progress.
Sure. Super. Thank you. I asked for advice on how to upload it. The advice was quite technical. However, I found WeTransfer was brilliant for uploading. Any other suggestions? I'm guessing
again, it's going to vary from board to board. So you know, every board is going to have probably slightly different uploading protocols. So I think as long as your file sizes are the right, are compliant, they're not overly large, you'll probably be fine. But again, you'll have to check the board. And again, as I said earlier, some of the boards actually specify, you know, use these particular programs or apps for compression if you need.
Let's see, the next one is a bit of an advice. Someone was asking about how to prop up the iPad or iPhone, and someone says I use Blue Tack to stick it onto a stable music stand.
That's a good solution.
Yeah, good option. I think there's some inexpensive options. There's like a plastic clamp thing with a little stand for the phone, which are also pretty good because you can switch them around.
The ones that go into a car, you know, you can fix your iPhone onto the you know, the radiator grill or whatever in the car.
Yeah, you could probably put that on a stand.
That would be quite helpful. I think that would be fine. That would work well. And the other thing is about I think most boards would offer advice, wouldn't they, if somebody was stuck on didn't feel terribly technically competent. I mean, certainly we do, don't we? And I'm sure everyone wants to be helpful, don't they? You know, to enable this, really.
And also, actually, you might find your students probably know more than you do anyway. So
absolutely.
You might just ask them.
Yes, that might be the case. Someone is asking about the setting to look for to choose 720p. I'm guessing that's pretty obvious.
Well, again, you'd have to go back. You'd have to go and look in whatever device it was, go into settings for the camera, and you should be able to see it there. I mean, there's so many devices. I can't really answer that question. So it'd either be on your laptop or your camera or your PC or Mac or whatever.
And you could Google it, couldn't you? You could just Google it.
Yeah.
I mean, like we Google everything. Google that, and you'll get a very quick answer.
Okay. Any more questions? If there's anything else, I mean, have you had to, I don't know, decline a recording because it was too bad, or?
Okay. We've had at the start there were a couple of recordings that actually very rarely, but there have been one or two, so we've just sent them back and asked them to be resubmitted, and we've explained why. But that's
missing components at the beginning, but actually it's quite smooth now, isn't it?
It is.
Very few really have any problems.
Great. I think someone's again about the setting. They're asking about video size. sure if it's video size. I think
yeah, you would need to check. You'd need to check with each board what the file size is. With us, it's huge. It's something like 750 megabytes. So I think it might be more than that actually. Which actually on 700 at 720, that's basically a whole day's worth of recording. So we've got plenty of leg room there.
No, I think she means in the settings when you choose 720p or 1080p. Is it in the video size setting section? Does that make sense?
I wouldn't know because it would depend on the device you're using.
Yes.
But I would imagine it would be the frames. It would be the FPS. Yeah.
Okay, super. Well, we seem to be storming through all the questions. Oh, there's another one. This has been very useful. Thank you very much. Thank you for putting this session. I particularly like the idea of using recording in lessons on occasion as a valuable teaching tool. Also, a good idea to get students to use recordings rather than having just a one mock recorded exam.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I mean, I would really encourage you to do it because I know from my own lessons many years ago, first of all, I did record my lessons, but I never had a frame, a productive frame to actually use them. So, obviously, the thing that I did was I just listened for the mistakes, which just was not very constructive, really. And it wasn't until I was working with a teacher in Germany who said, well, when we're going to record your lesson, but what are you going to be listening for? And so I said, well, the mistake, obviously, kind of, the bits to put right. And he just said, that's not a very constructive way of doing it. And I have to say, it checked my progress and my understanding of what I was doing improved radically. So that's always been my approach now, and I've noticed that with my students. But you do have to, I think the problem is that you have to encourage your students to do that, because automatically they're going to listen for the things that go wrong and they're going to focus on them. And you've got to try and somehow encourage and say, no, ignore all that. We're not interested in that. Look at the bits that work, because actually, and what I say to my students is, go away and listen to the recording and come back next week and and your task is to find one thing, particularly with singers, classical singers, one thing in your recording that you like, and you have to tell me what it is. And they eventually, it's hard work, but they do. And actually, of course, the next time it's 2 things and then 4 things, and then it gets bigger. So that's what I mean about curating the good rather than collecting the old tat and sort of using it as a millstone to drown yourself with criticism.
Yeah, I remember at college we were constantly told to record ourselves and then watch it back later, not just for the mistakes, but various other things. And yeah, it was so, you find out so many things. And it also came in handy when you then do recording for any auditions or anything, because it's suddenly so hard to play it all in one go and just not edit it, and you're there for an entire day doing
so in actual
takes.
fact, we're actually equipping people for living in the modern world, actually, and the demands of being professional as well. What are the main reasons that cause a student to fail an exam? Okay, where do I start? A really bad intonation could be one. Actually, where students stop and start and stop and start and stop and start. If their fluency is not good, then that's probably going to be reflected in a not good mark. And just not knowing the pieces, or occasionally at the upper grades, probably playing something at half speed is probably not going to garner them many marks. So generally, what we want as an examiner, particularly at the lower grades, is a nice fluent performance that's got some, light and shade in it, and that communicates something. And the upper grades, more detail, more color, more engagement, more communication, because that's basically what it's about.
And really, that's the same for a live exam, digital. I mean, any exam, really. I mean, there's no difference in a recorded exam from that point of view.
Yeah.
What is the best position for a singer to stand in the frame? Perhaps from the waist up?
Yeah, waist up is fine. Waist up is fine. Yeah. I mean, we've seen all, I've seen somebody actually who's, I've seen the whole of them. I've seen from the waist up, but probably as I'm speaking, if I was singing to you now, that's probably not necessarily so good, because if you do need to move a little tiny bit, it's going to be a bit wobbly on the frame. So yeah, waist up is good. Waist up or full length if you can frame it appropriately. And if they're doing musical theatre, exams, just make sure that there's enough, that the frame covers their movement. Yeah. So you might need to actually just rehearse within the frame, so that everything can be seen, gestures, props, anything that's necessary. Are you finding the results from Are you finding the results from the recorded exams are the same or better than live exams? I don't think we're in the position actually yet to do an analysis, but I think, and Annie, correct me if I'm wrong, but just I would say that the vast majority of candidates who do exams, whether they're live online, face-to-face, or recorded, they tend to do pretty well, because why would they be doing an exam if they weren't ready? I mean, it does happen occasionally, and I could tell you one or two funny stories at some point, but I won't, about candidates who weren't ready and what the teachers have commented to me afterwards. But I just generally, no, I mean, I think the standard is probably, it's about, I don't think we've got a higher number of failures or anything particular. I think probably there's been a slight rise in standard, probably because some candidates have had more time at home to practice. And I know that actually one of the things that really touched my heart was a parent who said, "Thank you very much for being able to do having the digital offer for the exams, because that's the only thing that's kept my son that's been so beneficial to his mental health, because he hadn't got anything else to look forward to." So, good. Yeah, that's
how
useful.
how much upper body movement would you expect to see in a classical singing exam performance?
The same as you'd see in a live performance. So, obviously, I can't, not lots of flailing around, and because that's going to be you wouldn't do that in a live performance. So it will be the same as you would expect. We don't expect people to be rigid and solid. There needs to be expression, and it's mostly what's going on here actually. That for classical music, it's just standard concert platform, expectation in a recorded exam or a live exam. But obviously, if it's musical theatre, then there are different parameters. And also, if you're singing an opera, then you might want to do a little bit more than you were singing a piece of Schubert Lieder.
Of course. Okay, if there's any further questions, please let us know. If not, we'll start to get ready for the end. Any questions? If I receive anything, I'll let you know. But anyway, thank you very much to you both. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. It's been a great discussion. The webinar will be available on the ISM Trust website, and as I said, on our YouTube page, potentially from tomorrow. You can find it at ismtrust.org/webinars. On our website, you can find a range of webinars available to view on demand, along with other resources to support you and the sector, many of which are available for free. If you'd like to find out more about our work or are interested in ISM membership, if you're not already a member, you can find more details on our website, which is ism.org. ISM membership is open to all UK music professionals and offers legal advice and representation, comprehensive insurance and specialist services. Our next webinar in this series will be also with Ivor and Annie on the 13th of October, so next week Wednesday, and we'll be looking at preparing for live online examinations. I'll just post a link in the chat now so you can sign up for it and find out more details if you are interested. And lastly, just to say thank you very much, and I hope you'll be attending another ISM Trust webinar soon. Thank you to you both again, and have a lovely rest of your afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.